In our last lesson, we built up a really basic table view. It simply had one section and 5 rows. It had no events for when the user might tap a row, so it was purely a display list. In this lesson, we're going to go a little bit more complex, and we're going to build up multiple sections, and we're going to hook the action for when the user taps on a given cell. We have our table view, but in the attributes, we have not set a prototype cell. So you'll note that you don't see that in our storyboard. We're going to work with that in code. So our storyboard, of course, is really simple. All we have is the table view and its referencing outlet. And that's it. And of course, the constraints, just so it fills up the entire screen. So all the work is really in the code. Now previously, we had set our view controller to inherit from Uitableview data source, and now we're also going to add another one, Uitableview delegate. And we need to set the table view's delegate equal to self. And we're going to be using that in order to hook the event for when the user taps on a row. We still have our cell ID string variable. And of course, we still have our data source. In that function number of sections in the table view, we're now going to return 5. So I'm going to have 5 sections. And just to demonstrate that I can have a different number of rows in a section, we're just going to do a little bit of math. So I'll have 3 rows in the first section, 4 rows in the second, and it'll go up accordingly. And now we have cell for row at index path. And we initially called the same thing, the DQ reusable cell with identifier, and with that cell ID identifier. But because we don't actually have a prototype, we need to check to see if the cell is nil. It will be the first time this is called. So we need to create that cell by calling Uitableview cell, and we're going to use a default style. There are a number of other styles that we can use in a Uitableview as well. The default style is pretty basic, and it basically gives us the single line of text. And we pass in our reuse identifier called cell ID. After we've created this cell once, we're going to be reusing it repeatedly as this function is called. So that's the difference in building up the prototype in code. And in code, we can also set the cell's background color. And I'm just setting it to light gray, essentially just to show you that you can do some formatting in code as well. And then I'll set the text label just as we did before, and return the cell. So now let's get to the section bit. There are 2 functions that we can use for the section. The first is title for header in the section, and we're just going to return the string section and the section number. And the second function is title for footer in section, and we're going to return a string called end section and the number. So the title for the section will show up before any of the actual data rows. And then the title for the footer will show up after all of those rows. And then finally, we'd like to know when the user has tapped on a cell. We may do this to go to another view, which is a really common use of this kind of control. For instance, if we have a list of users and then we want to show the details of a user profile, we might show the list in this table view, and then when we call this function didSelectRow at index path, we might go to another view that shows the actual details of that user's profile. So for now, all we're going to do is log the row and the section that the user tapped. And then we're going to deselect the row just to clear out that selection. Okay, so let's see what all of this looks like. So now I have my sections. I have my header that says section 1 and my footer that says end section 1. Now you don't have to have both, and you don't actually have to have any if you don't want to. They're optional, but I wanted to show you both of them. And I still have my rows, and you can see the breakup of the different sections and the fact that I have a different number of rows for each one of the sections. And if I select a row, you can see it highlights and then deselects. And then my logging showed up as well. Row 7 was selected in section 5. Just to make sure. Row 8 was selected in section 5. So it's gotten that selection correct as well. So there we go. There we have created our sections, our section headers, our section footers, different number of rows for each section, and have handled the event for when the user taps on a row. So that's built up a fair amount of functionality in the table view. But we're not done yet. Next thing we're going to do is what are called accessory views, and we'll see that in the next lesson.